Hi, so I'm going to be asking you a few questions about how you feed your kid. So, how old is the child that's living with you and what's his name?
Max, my son, is 16.
Perfect. And so, what do they eat on a typical day?
On a typical day when he's at school, breakfast will be either um, oatmeal, eggs. Sometimes, if we got enough time in the morning, we might make pancakes or waffles. Sometimes cereal, yogurt, and there's, regardless of which one of those things I just mentioned, there's always a fruit involved. If he's going to have a school, a pack of lunch, and the lunch normally comprises of four things: a fruit, which is normally a banana because he really likes those; an energy bar, which he'll normally eat in the afternoon after school is done and before he starts sports; a small bag of nuts, normally pistachios or cashews, something like that; and then what I guess you would call the main course. And that might be something as simple as a slice of focaccia, or what I often do, particularly in the winter time and spring, is prepare something for him out of a thermos. And that might be leftovers from the night before, or it might sometimes be a processed food, something that is frozen and that gets heated in the microwave. Like a mac and cheese. But more often than not, it's going to be something that was made the night before, and that relates to what he has for dinner. I would say that virtually everything he has for dinner is prepared from scratch and not any kind of processed food. Nothing out of a can unless it's a basic material like beans or something that's used in whatever we're preparing for that night. Definitely never anything frozen. So, we'll make anything from a chicken, meat, or fish dish. Often, however, we'll also have a vegetable dish. I would say he probably eats meat once or twice a week, fish once or twice a week, and then a pasta or a vegetable primary dish once or twice a week, roughly
Mm-hmm.
that. So no processed foods. And as far as what he drinks, there are no sodas at all. Most of the time, what he drinks, whether it be for breakfast or dinner, is going to be either filtered water that we put through, a home filter, or a San Pellegrino if you want
Yeah.
sparkling water. And
Sounds
that's
like
it.
Yeah, sounds like you got all the bases covered. Pretty good stuff. I realized you said that he goes to practice after school. Does his involvement in sports affect how you feed him? Do you think at all?
Yeah, I give him more now than I used to, even as recently as, say, a few months ago when he wasn't actively in sports. And he comes home in the, this is curious, he also will come home in the late afternoon, 5:30, 6 o'clock, and say he's hungry, even though dinner is not going to be for another hour or two, and he'll grab something out of the fridge, make himself a small sandwich or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, he eats more.
Well, he's definitely at that age where he needs a lot of food.
That's true.
And
That's true.
you were also talking about how you don't really have many processed foods. So, are you concerned about how processed foods are, their sodium content or sugar, or if they're organic or GMO or anything like that?
My primary concern with processed food is the high salt and sugar content. If on occasion there is a reason, if there is a reason for me to buy a processed food like a frozen meal that I might give him in the thermos for lunch, we'll try to get the organic, or if they have like a low salt, low sugar version of it, we always go for that as well.
Mm-hmm. That's good because it can be a
Mm-hmm.
big issue for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, do you have any concerns, past or present, about childhood obesity or undernutrition?
I don't have any concerns about any of my kids' childhood obesity, nor about malnutrition. I think good nutrition was always a priority from our firstborn to our youngest, Max. We always tried to make sure that we were putting good food on the plate. Now, we weren't manic about it. It wasn't like we insisted 100% has to be organic. Far from it. I mean, there were times where organic, particularly when you or your older sister were younger, where it was just tough to find as much as you can now. And similarly, as is obvious, we're not following a vegetarian or a vegan diet, but we don't overemphasize meat either.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. Kind of give a little bit of autonomy so you don't really want one thing more than they should.
Yeah, I mean, when it's interesting. It's really different than I was younger, than when I was, your guys' age, because my parents fed me well also and did not use processed foods very much, but more than I do. And the concept of buying organic didn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely a big movement these days. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
As is the whole farmers market thing. I know you go to the farmers market a lot, which helps.
Yeah, we have a good farmers market. The thing I would point out, though, is we're fortunate to be able to not only have a farmers market, but also to be able to afford the goods at the farmers market, which I always notice are substantially more expensive than the stuff you find that's not organic in a grocery store.
Yeah, and that's a big issue. I think it's more social that affects nutrition, but we'll need to find better solutions than what I can come up with at the moment for that. But on a different note, does Max take any supplements or any special foods?
He does not. It's interesting. I'll just go on a sideline here briefly. About 3 years ago, I got a call from the office at his junior high school. I didn't know if he'd gotten in trouble or anything, but basically, he'd almost fainted in class. And so I went over and I picked him up. And it was so unusual for him that I made a doctor's appointment that afternoon. We stopped by the doctor, and the doctor looked at him and immediately said, okay, I can see you're not drinking enough. You're not as hydrated as you should be. And she could tell that by the way his lips looked. And then she started asking about what he'd eaten for lunch. And he said, well, I didn't eat my lunch today. And what he would do is go out. And again, this was 3 years ago when he was in junior high. He would go out during the lunch break and play basketball and not eat. And the doctor pointed out and said, look, you don't have to take special supplements or anything. And you don't have to gorge yourself, but you need to eat properly, and especially if you're going to be active, as he is. And so I think he's aware of that. But, no, to answer your question, he doesn't take supplements.
Yeah, no, but sometimes you need some kind of trigger to really make you start thinking about what you're eating. And almost fainting in class will do that to you.
And you should be eating. I mean, obviously, I told him all along, when the lunches would come back uneaten, he wasn't devious enough to just throw the lunches away and say, yeah, I ate them. He would just bring them back, and none of it was eaten. And I tell him, Max, you really need to eat, particularly if you're going to be active. But of course, I was just a parent, so he didn't listen. But when the doctor looked him in the eye and said, you need to do this, he changed his ways.
Yeah, it's good. Could get an outside opinion sometimes.
Yeah.
And the final question I have for you is there anything you wish you knew more about when it comes to child nutrition?
That's one of those things where there may be things that I should know more about, but I don't know what those things are. Mm-hmm. We learn as we've gotten older that certain things that you had never really worried about that much are in fact a concern, even for, especially for kids. So to answer your question, no, off the top of my head, we know about saturated fats and sugars and salts, but probably in a couple of years they'll say, oh, here's something else that you need to worry about, but it's not on my radar right now.
Yeah, I know. It's a really constantly changing field. It can be hard to keep up with sometimes. But like I said, or like you mentioned earlier, I think you have a really balanced diet and you just try and focus on healthy foods, and that's really all you can do.
And one thing that I think we did right, just to repeat myself, is none of you ever got hooked on sodas. I mean, sodas they weren't part of the diet.
Yeah. No, that's definitely been a big issue lately.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Okay, my pleasure.